Hello, divine creations, divine marvels, infinite, forever free consciousnesses. Forever free, yet, boy, can it sure feel bound sometimes. Thank you so much for dropping by this video. This is a topic very dear to my heart. So, in this channel, I've been very critical of one particular modern spiritual teacher, but the modern non-dual satsang scene in general. And some people have asked me why, and sometimes I ask myself why. And the answer is very simple: because it's dangerous. It's deadly, deadly dangerous. The paradox is it's also slightly, somewhat helpful. And to a few individuals, it's very helpful. And it's the long and short of it is it's a distorted presentation of truth that has and will continue to wreck many people's lives. It'll very deeply help some. It'll a little bit help others. Other people, it'll send them in the wrong direction, and other people, it will take them down a very deadly, dangerous path. Here's why. Advaita Vedanta is grounded in and founded in the understanding of the nature of the mind. This is not taught in modern non-duality. That's why scholars call it Neo-Advaita, and I completely agree with that assessment. So, I've talked about it before on this channel, and anyone who isn't aware of this and is interested in non-duality needs to learn a little bit about the three gunas, which means qualities of mind. Sattva is the guna of discernment and peace. Rajas is the guna of desire. And tamas, they're all interesting, but tamas is the quality of mind of lethargy, ignorance, delusion. Tamas is so interesting because it's also groundedness. So we all need a little tamas, or we would just float away. So, why is this so important? Well, to look at that, we're gonna talk about de-evolution, or more interestingly, the creation of the false self. And I'm going to be drawing from James Schwartz's book, The Essence of Enlightenment. And we're going to be looking at chapter 7, which he talks about how these gunas literally create the false self. And then if it's not properly attended to, how one de-evolves over time. And then we'll look at how this is tied into lack of preparation, and seeking enlightenment will kick your ass. And just to be clear, I'm not speaking for James. I'm just using this amazing book as a resource. So he talks about 5 stages of de-evolution, or the creation of the ego, how you look at it. Stage 1 is delusion, ignorance, where one loses contact with with our true nature, with the self. This comes about and can happen for a variety of reasons. I'm not going to so much go into that, but first of all, this forever free nature, contact and knowledge of that gets lost. That's stage 1. Stage 2, desire and fear. So desire, so again, the veiling of the self is tamas. That's tamas guna. That's tamas. His primary job is it veils the self. That's why it's the guna, the quality of mind of ignorance, but it's also known as the quality of mind of veiling. So once our self is veiled, then comes desire, stage two, which is rajas. Now, there's nothing wrong with desire, and what we'll see is that desire is an essential part of life. And when we have desire without connection to the self, then we also have fear. And we also have then the arising of unhealthy desire. So we're complete and whole. And then we lose connection to that via tamas. That's stage one. Stage two. So there's always, until we're dead, there's always some rajas. But then in the losing of that connection of the self, rajas gets agitated, desire, because we feel incomplete. So we're like, oh, I need to be complete and happy and whole. And so then we start seeking. The only problem with that is A, it's based on a lie, and B, we're seeking from an agitated place, like, oh, I need this. And then there's fear about not getting what we want. So this cycle goes on. And then when we don't get what we want, we feel either frustration, which aggravates rajas more. Rajas is a very active quality of the mind. Now, again, activity isn't bad. It's not always like this, but it's like this when we're coming from a place of less than wholeness, which then just, of course, creates more agitation. And then we make bad decisions, which creates more agitation. And then when we don't get what we want, sometimes we feel really depressed, which is tamas. So this quality of seeking then agitates rajas and aggravates tamas, thus even more so unhealthy seeking, even more so veiling the self. So that takes us to stage three, anxiety and control. As um, as rajas gets more agitated and tamas becomes more dense, then we really start to suffer. And from that suffering, we start to not just feel fear, like, oh no, I might not get what I want, but anxiety starts to become more of a normal thing. What's the word I'm looking for? It fills the physical body and, in yogic terms, what's called the subtle body, which, let's just put that as there's, in yogic terms, there's five bodies. So anxiety starts to become agitation, and anxiety starts to become the norm, not just a feeling, but the different bodies get riddled with it. And then, of course, this is exhausting, which increases tamas, and then it just goes deeper and deeper. And so then we try and control things to try and manage these feelings. Well, that doesn't go so well. And that takes us to stage four, which is anger. When we don't get what we want and we really start to suffer, and there's all this rajas agitating us, and there's a beginning to build up of tamas, then we start to feel like a victim and we get angry. Now, of course, anger is rajas at its extreme, but then it's also exhausting. So it also increases tamas, and it's also based in ignorance, which increases tamas. So it's a downward cycle. If this continues unabated, it takes to the place of delusion, where ignorance and agitation are now predominant, dominating qualities in the different bodies. In the physical body, I don't have the five bodies memorized, and become guiding principles, where agitation, anxiety, and ignorance become the guiding principles that guide one's life. Once you've hit stage five, James, in his book, he gives the example of someone who's deeply into stage five. It just doesn't give a shit about life anymore, and hardcore addiction and so forth and so on. So, how does all of this relate to modern spirituality and lack of preparation? Well, Neo-Advaita and the modern satsang movement doesn't teach people how to manage the mind. It doesn't teach people how to reduce rajas and how to reduce tamas, but more so rajas. So what that means is people are approaching the quest for enlightenment with agitated rajas. They're desiring, they're seeking, they're grabbing. And then it starts to become a demand. Like, I have to become enlightened. I have to become peaceful. And also, since we're coming from this agitated, grabby place, then there starts to be this desire for spiritual experience. Like, oh, I have to have I have to have this big, huge experience. I have to be in a state of bliss. I have to have divine ecstasy always. And then it becomes an addiction. Self-inquiry will not um, destroy tamas or rajas. It'll help you manage it, but in helping it manage it, it'll also create an addictive cycle. Now, self-knowledge. Now, someone who, through grace or is able to break through to absolute self-knowledge, that can purify tamas and rajas. But going straight to self-inquiry is it's a shit show. It's just a downward spiral. That's why Ramana Maharshi, the only thing Ramana Maharshi wrote as an instruction book, basically on how to get enlightened by Ramana Maharshi. It's called Upadesha Saram. Um, the first thing he talks about is karma yoga, which is karma yoga is the skill of managing the gunas, of decreasing tamas, of decreasing rajas, and of cultivating. Well, here's what he said. Here's verse 3. Action dedicated to God and done without desire purifies the mind and aids liberation. That's karma yoga in a nutshell. Like, hey, I'm going to do what I'm doing. I'm going to dedicate it to God. I'm going to do what's right. It's also called doing your duty or do your dharma. And I'm not going to want anything in return. The results are up to God, and I don't even want the results. I'm just doing what I'm doing out of the love of God and because it's my duty. And from a sense of being of service to creation. So without that attitude, the quest for enlightenment just becomes a quest for a spiritual high. And let's see if there's anything else I want to add. So I highly recommend, James Schwartz breaks it down, karma yoga, so well, and his book is available free online. He has a whole chapter on karma yoga. I think I'm going to read a quote from that chapter, actually. Here's a beautiful quote. The experience of the reflection of the self in the subtle body, which is a fancy way of saying self-knowledge, can be made more or less constant, brighter, and intense if rajas and tamas are purified from the subtle body by karma yoga. Boom. Thank you, James. That's pretty much that's what I was just saying. um, someone who's, Ramana Maharshi said only the person who has no interest in worldly things is qualified to practice self-inquiry. Only someone that's a very direct way of saying, hey, someone who has very little ignorance and next to no agitated rajas is qualified. And karma yoga is the way to get yourself qualified. Get yourself, get these bodies prepped. Thank you so much for joining in. Take care. Much love.